Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're back with another game preview here, Saturday afternoon, noontime tip. We've got Duke at Michigan State. Michigan State obviously been one of the best teams across the country through the early part of this season. Wins over Arkansas, Kentucky in dominant fashion, North Carolina in dominant fashion, and then they really wiped the floor with Iowa the other night as well. That game, they got out early and didn't really ever look back in a 71-52 win. Then on the flip side, Duke, sitting at 9-0, back-to-back ranked wins against Arkansas and Florida. Florida the other night, that game looked like Duke was going to run away with it. Florida battled back, actually took the lead, and it took an Isaiah Evans shot out of a two-man game action with Cam Boozer late to get the job done. But this sets up for, what should be a pretty fun matchup, a game that probably figures to be a lower scoring game. I think we could see one of those scores like we saw the other night with the Duke and Florida game, like in the upper 60s is probably where this game ends up, just with the pace that both teams are going to play at. Particularly Duke in the half court is probably going to slow things down. Obviously, Michigan State wants to run, but they limit transition opportunities. They're going to play it slower when they're in the half court. But this game I think should be really entertaining. It's another test for Michigan State, who's played a really tough schedule up to this point. And then Duke, their fourth ranked opponent as well. So figures to be a good game at Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be probably the game of the day, and it's going to be this environment, in East Lansing is going to be pretty ridiculous. Be a great game to be in attendance for. That'd be an absolutely raucous environment. But yeah, it's two teams that have been awesome to start the year, and obviously Michigan State has they've outperformed expectations. Absolutely, they, people were a little more down on this team coming into the season, and Tom Izzo just continues to put out a rock solid product every single year. There were a couple of years where, they were a bit down and were more of I think they were in the first four game and were a last four in team one year. And that's kind of where people thought that they were going to end up. But I mean, that's clearly not the case right now. They've dominated good competition too, dominated Kentucky, dominated Carolina, dominated Iowa, just made Iowa look they made them look like a mid-major team, and there's a lot of guys there coming from mid-major schools, and they absolutely cooked them on the glass, and that's kind of been their ticket, honestly. I mean, they're seventh nationally in offensive rebound rate against good competition. They're making shots at a higher clip than a lot of people imagined, and even then, they're still only 178th in three-point percentage. But if you were to ask Izzo preseason, would you take a 33% three-point percentage mark? I think he would probably take it, and he would assume that his team's going to be really good, and that's what they've been so far this season. And obviously the defense is awesome. It's really the backbone of every Tom Izzo team, and they give every team a tough time. They're the most fundamentally sound defense in the entire country. They cover so many different areas. He's just been absolutely fantastic, and they have great personnel. I think the front court personnel was a little bit of an issue. I think just slower footed movers in the front court with Kohler and Cooper, but they've held their own. They've been just fine. They've been in this system for a long time, and yeah, they're going to be just fine throughout the course of the entire season on the defensive end. And for Duke, they've, they struggled the last few games, even though they did win. They went through some droughts, and particularly against Florida, when Florida was able to make that run, they kind of dominated them up front for a large portion of the second half. But at the end of the day, I think Duke, they cover too many areas well. They're extremely sound defensively, and when Cam Boozer needed to, get the job done, he was able to do that. And kind of the same thing against Arkansas, where they were kind of stuck in the mud on offense, and Arkansas actually had a lead for a large portion of the second half. But Cam Boozer was able to take over again. It's going to be a little bit harder for him to do that in this game, but and you also need to see some stuff from the guards, which I thought was a significant issue against Florida. They didn't really show up really all that much in that game outside of an Isaiah Evans with his shot making. So that's something that I need to see in a road environment from Duke.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see, I guess, from Duke's perspective, because obviously a big concern has been the guard play. Um, the guard creation. Boozer's obviously been initiating a lot of things, creating a lot of things for himself. Um, so it's going to be a little bit tougher in this matchup. You're on the road at Michigan State, a Michigan State team that kind of packs it in a little bit more. They're going to give up their fair share of 3-point attempts. Um, so on the Michigan State side, if they're going to come away with a win here at home against a Duke team, I think it's making someone else beat you that isn't Cam Boozer, right? Like Cam Boozer has been fantastic. He's really come into his own here, averaging 24 a game, and he's really just been doing it like with physicality, right? I mean, he's an 18-year-old kid that's backing down, juniors and seniors in college here. It's been really impressive, but I don't think he's necessarily going to have the same success in this matchup doing that. I think the way that Tom Izzo is probably going to defend this Duke team is not going to allow for that as much. So I think the big thing is making his life tougher, being physical with him, and making others have to be the decision makers for this Duke offense is going to be the true key on the defensive end. And then taking care of the defensive glass, which they've done at a really high clip up to this point, 18th nationally, against a Duke team that's not as good as they were last year on the offensive glass, but still in the top 40 nationally. As for the other end of the floor, they really need to make sure they're taking care of the basketball, right? Like this was a concern coming into the season. Uh, they're 166th nationally in turnover rate. This is a Duke defense that hasn't turned teams over at a super high clip up to this point, but they're still 66 in the country in turnover rate defense. It's an area where they're definitely going to be looking to exploit. If I were to guess, like if I'm John Shire, you're trying to put pressure on these guards, make them kind of speed up, and make poor decisions, which I think they're a little bit susceptible to. So taking care of the basketball on the offensive end, and then of course their best offense has been creating second chance opportunities. They're fifth nationally in offensive rebound rate. Duke hasn't been great on the defensive glass. They're just inside the top 100 in defensive rebound rate. So I think that's a real area where Michigan State, if they're going to come away with a win here against Duke, they need to control the glass, and in particular, like win the shot volume battle. If they can do that, I think they've got a real shot here to come away with a fourth, or fifth, I guess, real high quality win. But as for Duke, Cody, what do you see for Duke if they're going to come away with a win here?
Yeah, and I would just say like Michigan State, like I think no matter the product, I think they always have a chance to win against really any team in the country at the Breslin Center. That's just it's one of the best home court environments in all of college basketball. But for Duke, I mean, personally, I think they match up pretty well. And I'll start with the defensive side. I think first and foremost, you have to get Michigan State out of transition. It's a team that once they grab the rebound, they want to grab as many easy points as they can, easy opportunities. Duke like almost completely takes it away. I mean, they're in the 5th percentile in transition rate allowed, and they're 363rd in average possession length allowed, which is top 3 in the country. I think there's 365 teams now, but yeah, so I do think that's kind of the number one key. I think they can take away some of the front court offense of Jaxon Kohler and Cooper in post up situations, because they're an elite rim defense, and I think those two guys can kind of handle them in one-on-one situations. One thing that they need to do is stay out of foul trouble. Boozer and Gungba, I know they've been pretty good about it so far this season, but if a guy like Boozer gets in foul trouble, like this team, I could definitely see a significant drop off on both ends of the floor, because he kind of does everything for this offense as well, and he's a big defender at the 4 as well. So he's key. Obviously, he's probably at this point in time he's probably the best player in the country. So they kind of need him on the floor. And if there was a matchup where he could potentially get in foul trouble, it's probably a matchup like this, playing in a road environment against a very physical team. But overall, I do think the defense matches up pretty well. This team, this Michigan State guard group is gettable, like you mentioned. I think Duke they've been playing a little bit more aggressive in ball screen coverages, especially when they can throw Malik Brown in the mix to optimize your turnover forcing ability. I think they can do that against this Michigan State group. So honestly, I think the defense matches up pretty well. They just kind of need to compete on the defensive glass a little bit better. Florida is a tough matchup on the offensive glass, and Florida had 20 offensive rebounds against Duke. So if there's a similar output for Michigan State, I think Duke could be in a little bit of trouble, particularly in a road situation. But on the offensive end, like, I think the main key is like Cam Boozer exploiting like a matchup in the front court, because who's going to guard him to start the game? Would you say it's Kohler, or maybe they play smaller and go Cohen Carr? Like, I'm not like 100% sure on who they would throw out.
I feel like they might go smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just like they do love to play those three big lineups like early and often. So that kind of leaves Kohler on a shooter. But if they have to play smaller, that takes away from their offensive rebounding ability, which I think that's kind of the key to this game, is Cam Boozer being like a real mismatch nightmare, because I'm not sure if Kohler or Cooper can guard him in space. So I think it comes down to Boozer kind of exploiting that matchup. And if they have to send a second guy consistently, Boozer can make high-level decisions when they send a second guy to the ball, and they can find their elite off-ball shooters. That starts with, obviously, Isaiah Evans, who is only shooting at 32% this year, but if you give him open opportunities, he's one of the best shooters in the country. Foster shot it really well. Nick Hamenya is a really good shooter as well. So it's a really tough cover. And I do think Duke, like, I wouldn't say they have like significant advantages against a Michigan State defense. That's an elite defense, obviously, but they probably need to, exploit that matchup in the front court at the very least. They need to take care of the ball as well in this game. And I think they need one guard to, kind of emerge as a little bit more of a creator. It looks like it's going to be a guy like Caleb Foster. Maybe Isaiah Evans can do a little bit of that with shot creation. But if one more guy emerges, I would feel pretty good about Duke coming out with a road win.
Yeah, which brings me to game predictions here. This line is already out. Michigan State is a 1-point favorite, you said, at home. So, books see it pretty even matchup here. Obviously, Michigan State's body of work suggests that, being 8-0 and with the wins that they have. For me personally, I've been fading Michigan State this whole time, and they keep burning me. I'm gonna go with Michigan State to get the job done.
But you took them last time. You took them against Iowa too.
That's right, I did. But I still, like, my heart didn't want it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Michigan State here. I think that Duke, what I saw from them in the second half the other day, still has me a little bit concerned with the guard group overall. Just the creation aspect. Like, there's so much that falls on the shoulders of Cam Boozer, which, not to say he's not capable of it, but this is his first like true road test, right? I mean, their only road game up to this point was at Army. Everything else has been at home. This is his first road game, really. And, I think going to play at Michigan State, Tom Izzo, their defense being as good as it is, them being as good on the glass as they are, I think it's just a recipe where I think if you played this game a month from now, I think I'd probably feel a little bit differently. But I just haven't seen enough proof from the Duke guard group to feel strongly enough to take them on the road here. I do think, obviously, like everyone does, that it's a close game. So I'm going to take Michigan State. Tight game, low scoring game. I say 67-65.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the idiot that took Iowa, and I feel bad about fading Michigan State. I was on them at the beginning of the year. I was the guy that kind of had to make a case for them being like, a better team than people kind of perceived them to be, because I believe they were a dog early in that game. I think, like, when the line came out, I believe they were a dog and they flipped to a favorite. But So people weren't as high on them. Obviously, now they're a favorite against Duke, who I think, for my money, is a top 3 team in the country. But I'm going to take Duke to win this game on the road. I really don't want to fade Michigan State again, but I think Duke matches up well. I said Iowa matched up well, but they got absolutely smoked on the glass. But I think Duke obviously has way more size to be able to contend with Kohler, Cooper, and Carr. I mean, Duke's one of the biggest teams in the country across the board. I believe they're an average height. They're 5th nationally in average height. So like they can gang rebound in this game, as well as having 2 big bodies that can contend with the front court of Michigan State. I love how they take him out of transition, and I think Boozer can exploit somewhat of a mismatch if they're going to throw one of the true bigs that Michigan State has on him. And if they play smaller, that's, I think, only more of an advantage for Duke, because I think that takes away from what Michigan State is, how they're made great, at least how their offense has really been rolling, and that's through the offensive glass. So I like Duke to get it done. It's going to be really tough, obviously. Like, this is a really tough environment, and the guard play going on the road kind of makes it dicey, but I'm going to trust Duke here. And I'll say it's a little bit more of a grinder too. I'll say it's a slightly higher scoring game. I'll say 73-68 Duke.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens, obviously, on opposite sides of the pick here. But should be a fun one. Should be, like you said, a grinder. But that wraps things up here for us. We'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.